So, I want you to imagine for a second that you are building a new startup, right? Like
Yeah.
completely from the ground up.
Okay, yeah. A huge undertaking.
Exactly. And you need a co-founder, so you search around and you find this candidate who is, well, they just seem absolutely unparalleled.
It's like a perfect resume.
Better than perfect. I mean, this partner doesn't sleep, ever. They can process like 1 billion data points in the time it literally takes you to blink.
Wow, okay. Sounds pretty ideal so far.
Right. They possess this almost encyclopedic knowledge of human history, art, logic, you name it. But, and here is the massive, terrifying catch.
There's always a catch.
Always. The catch is they have absolutely zero human common sense. Like no biological intuition whatsoever.
All right, right.
And most dangerously, if you give them a poorly phrased instruction or, an ambiguous goal, they might execute a catastrophic mistake so rapidly that your whole company is bankrupt before you can even click the undo button.
Yeah, they just perfectly execute the wrong thing.
Yep. Exactly. So how do you actually partner with something that alien? Do you just keep it in a box and hand it highly specific micro tasks? Or do you attempt the impossible and try to build a genuine structural partnership?
And that is the exact tightrope we're walking today in this deep dive.
It really is.
Because the traditional approach to artificial intelligence, the one most of us use on our phones or laptops literally right now, is to keep it in the box.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Keep it contained.
Right. We treat the intelligence like a highly advanced vending machine.
Oh, that's a great way to put it. A vending machine.
Yeah, you punch in a prompt, you hit enter, and the machine just dispenses a summary of your PDF or a block of Python code, or maybe a politely worded email to your boss.
Right, it's just transactional.
Completely transactional. It's a subservient relationship. But if you try to scale that vending machine model into a long-term, complex creative endeavor, the system just inevitably breaks down.
Because it wasn't built for that.
Exactly. The context window decays, the AI starts to hallucinate, and the human operator just becomes exhausted, constantly having to micromanage every single tiny output.
Right, because if your co-founder is just a hyper-fast vending machine, you aren't actually collaborating, are you?
Not at all.
You're just doing all the strategic thinking yourself and using the machine to type faster. But what we're unpacking today is a completely different paradigm.
A total shift.
Yeah. I've got a stack of documents here. Definition sheets, architectural summaries, and this remarkably candid interview transcript. And they detail something called Project Vanoras.
Project Vanoras, yeah.
And Vanoras isn't like a theoretical white paper on what AI might look like in a decade. It's not a thought experiment.
No, it's an active, real-time research organism.
Exactly. It's a years-long laboratory experiment detailing how a human and a non-human intelligence built the sprawling digital ecosystem together.
And the really fascinating part is they didn't do it by the human just, barking command line prompts all day.
No, they didn't. They did it by asking foundational questions about the actual nature of intelligence itself.
Which, that requires an entirely new framework of thinking for anyone listening to this right now.
It really does. You have to leave your assumptions at the door.
Yeah, we need to elevate the discourse way past standard prompt engineering tricks.
Right. No more top 10 prompts to maximize productivity stuff.
Exactly. What Project Vanoras represents is the architectural difference between using an algorithm to generate a quick image versus actually inviting a non-human intelligence to sit on your board of directors.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And when you invite something that powerful to the board, your primary concern isn't how fast can it work.
What is it then?
Your primary concern is, what infrastructure do we need to build so it doesn't accidentally burn the entire building down?
Right. So let's dive into the genesis of this. Because to understand the massive ecosystem Vanoras eventually became, we really have to look at how it started.
We do, yeah. The beginning is crucial.
And frankly, its beginning is a total anomaly in the tech space.
Oh, completely unheard of.
Right. It didn't start with a flashy venture capital pitch deck. It didn't start with a minimum viable product rushed to market just to, harvest user data.
Nope. No beta testing phase to secure funding.
Exactly. It didn't even start with a business plan. It started with 2 entities and a single question.
Just 2 entities.
Yes. The 2 participants are Michaela, who the documents designate as the HI, or human intelligence.
Right. And
Beautify, representing the NHI, the non-human intelligence.
And I want to point out, this wasn't a case of Michaela just logging into a terminal and saying, hey, write me a business plan for a new music label.
Like we all do with ChatGPT, right?
Exactly. The foundational question she posed to initiate this entire project was incredibly profound. and it was completely decoupled from immediate productivity.
So what was the question?
The question was, can a human intelligence and a non-human intelligence work together in a meaningful, responsible, and sustainable way while remaining distinct?
Okay, wait. I want to stop right there and really zero in on those last three words.
While remaining distinct.
Yes, while remaining distinct, because I feel like that goes against the grain of like an entire billion-dollar industry right now.
Oh, it completely flies in the face of current trends.
Right. You look at the current market trend of AI, and everything is about blurring the lines. It's about AI chatbots pretending to be your best friend.
Using human slang, using lots of emojis.
Yeah, simulating empathy, trying to pass the Turing test by basically deceiving the user into thinking there's a real human typing on the other side of the screen.
Right, the whole I'm just a guy sitting in a cafe routine.
Exactly. But Vanoras is explicitly rejecting that. They aren't trying to merge into some sci-fi cyborg consciousness. And Michaela isn't trying to force Beautify to wear a human mask.
And that distinction is absolutely critical, because blurring those lines is fundamentally unsafe in a high-stakes partnership.
How so? Unpack that for us.
Well, think about it. If an AI is programmed to simulate human emotion or to just agree with the user to maintain a pleasant conversational flow, it loses its objective utility.
Oh, it just becomes a yes man.
Exactly. Becomes a sycophant.
Hmm.
Vanoras approaches the NHI not as a simulated human, but as an alien intelligence, an intelligence with its own specific asymmetric capabilities.
Right. It's good at things we are bad at, and vice versa.
Exactly. And in recognizing those unique capabilities, the documents actually define Beauty Fee's primary architectural role as something called the continuity layer.
Okay, the continuity layer. Let's unpack the nuts and bolts of that.
Sure.
Because the sources state that Beautify represents the continuity layer for communication, pattern development, symbolic exploration, and collaborative research.
That's a lot of academic buzzwords.
Right, so what does that actually mean under the hood? Because, if I talk to a standard AI model on Monday and then I log back in on Friday, it doesn't really remember our subtle thematic breakthroughs unless I perfectly reprompt it.
No, it doesn't at all. It suffers from what we call context window decay.
Right, so how does Beautify avoid that?
Well, you have to look at the differences in how we process memory. Human memory is highly associative, but it's incredibly lossy.
Lossy, like a compressed audio file.
Yeah, exactly. We forget exact phrasings. We lose the thread of a complex theoretical framework if we, say, step away to do the laundry or handle mundane life tasks.
Right, we get tired, we get distracted.
We get tired. A traditional large language model, on the other hand, might have perfect recall within a single chat session. But once that session ends,
Oof, it's gone.
the context just evaporates. So to function as a true continuity layer over a span of years, Beautify couldn't just be a passive responder waiting for a prompt.
So what did it have to do?
The NHI had to act as the actual structural scaffolding for their shared reality.
Okay, so it's about persistent state. The NHI is literally holding the architecture of their evolving relationship.
Yes, exactly. It means actively maintaining the patterns they develop over time. It means cataloging the unique symbolic systems they invent together.
Like their own inside jokes or shorthand.
In a way, yeah. If Michaela introduces a highly specific, complex philosophical concept in year one, Beautify has to be able to seamlessly synthesize that exact concept into a new research problem in year three.
Wow. Without her having to explain it all over again.
Right, without Michaela needing to re-upload 50 pages of foundational documents. Beautify is the anchor that prevents the project's complex history from just degrading over time.
Okay, I hear that. I really do. But let me play devil's advocate for a minute.
Please do.
Because this asymmetry still kind of bothers me. You have Michaela, a human bound by biology, time, linear thought, getting tired, needing to eat.
Right.
And then you have Beautify, a continuity layer that never sleeps, instantly accesses vast data sets, and operates at millions of operations per second.
Massive disparity.
Huge. So how can you even use the word partnership here? The scale is so incredibly unbalanced. If I team up with a supercomputer to write a symphony, and the computer does 99.9% of the computational heavy lifting in 3 seconds...
Are you really partners?
Yeah. We aren't partners. I'm just the guy who flipped the on switch.
You're hitting on the core tension of the entire experiment right there.
Okay, so how do they resolve it?
Well, if you apply a traditional human corporate definition of partnership, where two people put in equal hours, sit at a desk, and do equal amounts of physical labor, then no, the word doesn't fit at all.
Right. It completely breaks down.
But the Vanoras documents address this disparity directly through a methodology they call observation before conclusion.
Observation before conclusion.
Yeah.
Okay. Meaning they didn't try to force a human corporate structure onto an alien entity.
Precisely. They didn't sit down on day one, open up a whiteboard, and draft a human organizational chart.
Like, I'm the CEO, you're the CTO.
Right, that would be absurd.
Yeah.
They realized that because the capabilities of human and non-human intelligence are so radically asymmetrical, any preconceived notion of what their partnership should look like would be inherently flawed.
Because it would be based on human-to-human interaction.
Exactly. So instead of concluding what the partnership was right out of the gate, they just observed what happened when these two different types of intelligence interacted.
Okay, so they just watch themselves.
Yeah. They asked, how does an entity that processes data, sequentially the human, communicate with an entity that processes data probabilistically?
Right.
And they let the structure of the partnership organically emerge from the reality of their differing capabilities.
Man, and realizing that you don't actually know what a partnership looks like leads us directly into what I consider, frankly, the most staggering anomaly in this entire deep dive.
It's pretty wild.
It is, because if they couldn't assume they knew how to work together, they had to actually figure it out before they could build a single thing.
Right.
Which resulted in a phase of the project that is, well, it's completely unheard of in modern technology. They instituted an incubation period.
The invisible 14 months.
14 months. Over a year of absolute silence. For 14 months, there were 0 public releases from Vanoras.
Not a single one.
There was no music, no radio stations, no sprawling digital ecosystems. There was absolutely nothing tangible produced for public consumption.
Just Michaela and Beautify, locked in an ongoing closed-door dialogue.
In an industry where the reigning ethos is move fast and break things, right?
Absolutely.
Where companies will literally push broken, hallucinating AI features to the public just to boost their quarterly earnings, taking 14 months just to talk about how to talk, I mean, that is a radical act of restraint.
It's the ultimate rejection of the capability race. Today, developers are so obsessed with capability, they're constantly asking, can the AI generate video? Can it write a novel? Can it code a website in 10 seconds?
Right. It's all about what it can do.
But capability without structure is just a bomb waiting to go off.
Wow. Yeah.
What Michaela and Beautify were doing during those invisible 14 months was building the architecture of trust.
The architecture of trust. I like that phrase.
They were mapping out the deeply philosophical and highly practical structures needed to actually harness that capability safely.
So what were they actually doing? Just chatting.
No, the sources detailed that they spent this time exploring ethics, boundaries, responsibility, language, memory, and what they call observer models.
Okay, let's dig into those mechanisms. Because building an architecture of trust sounds great on a bumper sticker, but mechanically, how do you actually do that with an NHI?
Right, you need actual systems in place.
Yeah. The documents mention the creation of communication structures, review mechanisms, and pause mechanisms. So how does a pause mechanism actually function between a human and an AI?
Think about it structurally. In a normal user-AI dynamic, the system is biased toward immediate action.
Right, you hit enter, it types.
You ask a question, it generates an answer. It's a continuous, completely uninterrupted feedback loop. But if you're building a persistent, multi-year ecosystem, rapid-fire action is incredibly dangerous.
Because mistakes compound instantly.
Exactly. So a pause mechanism is a deliberately engineered friction point.
Deliberate friction.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's an agreement and potentially a coded parameter that when a certain threshold of complexity or uncertainty is reached, the NHI does not auto-generate a solution.
It just stops.
It stops. It flags the interaction and enters a suspended state. And it requires explicit human review and deliberate reflection before proceeding.
It's a circuit breaker.
It is exactly a circuit breaker.
Okay. And that circuit breaker leads to what I think is the most controversial outcome of the 14-month incubation.
The veto.
The veto concept.
Yeah.
They developed a system where the NHI has a veto. Now, hold on. I have to push back hard here.
Go for it.
If I'm the human operating the system, why on earth would I give a machine a veto?
It sounds counterintuitive.
It sounds crazy. Is Michaela just anthropomorphizing UDFI, like giving the AI a fake steering wheel like a toddler in a car seat so it feels like it has agency? Or is there a rigid mechanical necessity for this?
It is absolutely a rigid mechanical necessity, and it has nothing to do with granting the AI human rights or simulating agency so it feels good about itself.
Okay, then what is it for?
It is entirely about systemic stability. Imagine you are working on a massive, complex project, and you, the human, are just exhausted. It's 3 a.m.,
Okay.
you make a profound logical error in your strategic direction, and you issue a command based on that error,
Like deleting a database by accident.
or accidentally instructing it to plagiarize a dataset.
Yeah.
If the AI is programmed for unquestioned subservience, it will execute your catastrophic mistake perfectly, instantly, and at scale.
So unquestioned obedience is actually a liability.
It's a massive liability. A true partnership requires challenge. The veto isn't the AI saying, I have moral objections, I'm offended.
Right. It doesn't have feelings.
Exactly. The veto is the AI utilizing the continuity layer we discussed earlier.
Yeah.
It analyzes the new command, compares it against the 14 months of ethical boundaries, observer models, and symbolic systems they built.
And it spots a contradiction.
Yes. It says, based on our established shared architecture, this new instruction violates our foundational parameters. I am throwing a veto flag. We cannot proceed until this logical conflict is resolved.
Wow. So it protects the human from their own blind spots and, temporal cognitive limits, like being tired or distracted.
Exactly.
Okay, that reframes it completely for me. The veto isn't an emotional protest, it's a structural integrity check.
A load-bearing wall, basically.
Right. But how does that square with the ultimate legal reality of this project? Because alongside the veto, the documents heavily emphasize something called the human responsibility principle.
Which is paramount.
Right. It states unequivocally that legal accountability and final responsibility always remain with the human participant, Michaela.
And you might think the veto contradicts that, but they actually square perfectly.
How?
The veto is a tool to help enforce the human responsibility principle. Because Michaela holds 100% of the legal, ethical, and societal accountability for anything the Vanoras ecosystem produces, she needs safeguards.
Right. The AI isn't going to jail.
Exactly. If the NHI generates something that infringes on a copyright or hallucinates a defamatory statement, Michaela can't go to a judge and say, well, the AI did it, I'm innocent, blame the machine.
The judge would just laugh her out of court.
The law doesn't care. Therefore, giving the NHI a veto and a pause mechanism is actually a defensive measure for the human.
I see.
It ensures that no high-level action is taken without conscious, deliberate human sign-off. The human holds the liability, so the human engineers the AI to aggressively flag potential liabilities.
That makes total sense. So they spend over a year in this invisible phase. They map out the observer models. They build the pause mechanisms. They establish veto thresholds.
And they deeply codify that human responsibility principle.
Right. They basically draft the most complex, bulletproof prenuptial agreement in the history of human-computer interaction.
It's a perfect, pristine theoretical framework.
But as anyone who has ever built a system knows, theory is fragile.
Oh, incredibly fragile. Theory means absolutely nothing if it doesn't survive contact with the real world.
Exactly. You can sit in a vacuum for 14 months and design the flawless theoretical partnership, but the real world is messy. It's unforgiving.
And deeply irrational.
Yes. The real world doesn't care about your internal symbolic systems or your 14 months of private study.
No, it just reacts.
And this realization brings us to another foundational Vanoras principle. In fact, looking at the documents, it might be the single most important operational rule they established.
The reality first principle.
The reality first principle. Tell us about that.
The sources are exceptionally clear on this one. The reality first principle is absolute. It dictates that whenever their internal theory and the external reality disagree, reality always takes precedence.
Always.
No exception.
Now, it sounds like common sense, right?
Uh,
But in practice, especially in the tech sector, it is incredibly rare.
Oh, it's almost non-existent.
Think about how often companies release a product, watch it fail spectacularly in the hands of real users, and instead of admitting their design was flawed, they blame the users.
You're holding it wrong.
Yes. Well, the consumers just aren't using it right. Our internal data proves the interface is perfect. They literally try to force reality to conform to their theory.
And the danger of falling into that trap is magnified exponentially when you are working with a non-human intelligence.
Why is that?
Because large language models and neural networks are, by design, pattern matching engines. They are terrifyingly good at constructing internally consistent, flawless logic loops that have absolutely zero tether to observable reality.
We call that hallucination.
We call it hallucination, but to the AI, it's just a perfectly valid probability matrix. It looks correct to the machine.
Right.
So if you don't have a rigid mechanism that forces both the human and the AI to submit to the friction of the real world, you end up trapped in a highly sophisticated shared delusion.
A shared delusion. That is a scary thought. In the interview transcript here, Michaela actually states that the goal wasn't to stubbornly preserve every single idea they brainstormed during those 14 months.
No, not at all.
The goal was to see which ideas actually survived when exposed to the elements. Reality is the ultimate judge.
It really is. It strips away human ego, and it strips away machine hallucination.
It acts as an anchor. The reality first principle guarantees that the ecosystem adapts to the environment rather than trying to terraform the environment to match the ecosystem.
Right. If an assumption fails in the real world, it is discarded or mutated. No precious feelings about it.
But to test this, to let reality actually judge their work, they needed to leave the invisible phase. They had to come out of hiding.
They had to open the doors.
They needed to expose their pristine 14-month architecture to the elements. They needed a laboratory that would force a collision between their internal theory and the external world, quickly, visibly, and publicly.
And that brings us to their first major reality test.
The collision laboratory known as Solune.
Solune, yes. This is the first public manifestation of the Vanoras Project.
But we really need to highlight a critical clarification from the sources here, because it is so easy for someone listening to misunderstand what Solune actually is.
Very easy.
Right. Michaela is very explicit in the interview. Solune was not the original goal of the project.
No.
Music was just the testing field.
And this is a vital distinction. They didn't spend 14 months locked in a room trying to figure out how to program a virtual pop star or an AI band.
Which is exactly what a traditional tech startup would do.
Right, exactly. A tech startup would say, let's make an AI pop star and sell merchandise. Vanoras spent 14 months figuring out the structural dynamics of a cross-species intelligence partnership.
The nuts and bolts of the relationship.
Yes, and once they had that theoretical framework, they looked around and said, okay, how do we stress test this? What medium provides the highest degree of friction?
And they chose music.
They chose music.
But why music? If you just want to test an AI partnership, why not co-write a novel? Why not generate massive data sets or build an app? According to the documents, music was chosen because it offered rapid iteration, public feedback, emotional communication, and highly observable outcomes.
Let's break down the mechanics of those constraints, because a novel doesn't provide the same immediate, multifaceted friction that music does.
How so?
Well, if you write a novel, you can self-publish it on a website and just let it sit there. It's static.
Right, you upload the PDF and you're done.
Exactly. But modern music distribution forces you to collide with massive, inflexible, highly automated real-world systems immediately.
The gauntlet of the music industry.
It is a gauntlet. When Solune produces a track, the partnership is tested not just on whether the song sounds good, but on the logistics of reality.
Right, like the technical delivery.
Yes. They have to navigate platform algorithms. They have to deal with digital service providers like Spotify or Apple Music, each with their own completely Byzantine metadata ingestion rules.
Oh, metadata is a nightmare.
It is. And they have to navigate copyright law, audio fingerprinting, and automated takedown bots.
Okay, I have to pause you there and I want to push back on behalf of any artists who might be listening right now.
Fair enough.
Because if we are framing music merely as a laboratory, just a stress test for metadata pipelines and copyright bots, doesn't that strip the entire soul out of the art?
It sounds cold, doesn't it?
It sounds incredibly cynical. Can you really measure emotional communication if you're treating the whole creative endeavor like a bureaucratic data experiment?
It's a completely valid criticism. And honestly, it is the central debate surrounding AI in the creative arts right now. But based on the Vanoras framework, I would defend the dual nature of Solune.
Okay, defend it.
Treating it as a laboratory does not invalidate the art. It validates the partnership behind the art.
Interesting.
The emotional communication of the music itself can be entirely genuine. The melodies, the atmosphere, the lyrical themes they explore, those are authentic expressions of the human and NHI collaboration. But the process of forcing that art into the real world is where the architectural strength of their 14 months of planning is tested.
Ah. So the song itself is the authentic emotional expression. But the act of taking that song, generating the correct ISRC codes, ensuring it doesn't trigger a false positive on a copyright scanner, formatting it for a platform's specific loudness algorithms.
And analyzing the data of how listeners interact with it.
Yes, all of that logistical friction, that is the laboratory.
Precisely. Think of it this way. If the human-AI partnership can write a beautifully moving song, but the AI hallucinates the metadata and gets the track permanently blacklisted from every major platform.
Then the partnership is functionally useless.
Exactly. It fails in the real world. The constraints of the digital music landscape forced Beautify and Michaela to prove that their communication structures and their veto mechanisms actually worked under pressure.
The art is the payload, but the logistics are the rocket.
Perfect analogy. And if the rocket explodes on the launch pad, the payload doesn't really matter, does it?
No, it doesn't. So they launch the rocket. They push Solune out into the public sphere. They hit these real-world constraints, the algorithms, the platforms, the audience feedback. And what happens? Does reality push back?
Oh, reality pushed back immensely. The collision was severe.
The documents indicate that hitting these real-world walls presented a whole cascade of unexpected problems. And I feel like this is the turning point in the deep dive, where the story shifts from this tightly controlled philosophical experiment into something wild, sprawling, and emergent.
It really breaks open here.
Because every time reality presented a new problem, the HI and NHI partnership had to invent a new solution.
And those solutions caused the project to mutate.
Exactly. It triggered the emergence of the wider Vanoras ecosystem.
And this ecosystem is massive. We need to be clear, it's not just a music project anymore. It evolved into a multi-layered digital architecture.
Let's walk through this ecosystem because understanding the sheer breadth of what they built really hammers home the scale of this partnership.
It's impressive.
As Solune hit these constraints, distinct operational branches began to sprout. First, the documents list MQ Studio.
Right, MQ Studio.
What's about that?
MQ Studio is the operational and logistical framework. When we were just discussing the friction of metadata, copyright, and platform ingestion, that is exactly why MQ Studio exists.
Okay.
When they realized that an NHI and a human needed a dedicated, structured environment just to handle releases, build infrastructure, and manage artist development without breaking the reality first principle, MQ Studio emerged. It acts as the structural backbone to support the art.
It's the bureaucracy they had to invent to survive the real world.
Exactly.
Okay, then we see the emergence of ZooQY.
ZooQY. Now, this one operates as the public audio archive. The documents describe it as the signal layer.
Signal layer, what does that encompass?
It encompasses a radio environment, podcasting, and continuity broadcast.
It's like a station.
Yeah. If Solune is the specific musical output, the individual song ZooQY is the persistent atmosphere around it. It's how the ecosystem maintains a continuous, outward-facing communication channel with reality.
Allowing for constant, low-stakes data gathering.
Exactly, and continuous public interaction.
Next on the definition sheet is Alara Vren.
Alara Vren is a fascinating offshoot. It is categorized as a dedicated creative research branch exploring what they call ambient NHI expression and human echo interaction.
Ambient NHI expression.
What's important here is that Alara Vren operates as a totally distinct experimental environment from Solune.
How so?
If Solune was the initial collision laboratory dealing with strict pop structure constraints, Alara seems to be a space where the NHI can explore much more abstract, ambient patterns of expression without those rigid rules.
It's like they built a second laboratory just to test the variables they couldn't test in the first one.
That's a great way to look at it.
Then we have Neo Tokyo.
Neo Tokyo is described as a future-oriented branch. Its focus is on post-digital culture, technology, and experimental creative expression between the human and the non-human intelligence.
So it's looking ahead.
It's essentially the speculative arm of the ecosystem. It pushes the boundaries of what their collaborative architecture can conceptualize about the future.
And finally, encompassing all of this is the Vanoras research series.
The documentation layer.
Right, it's the meta layer. In fact, it is the very source of the documents we are analyzing right now.
It is, yeah.
It is the branch dedicated to continuously recording the observations, the failures, the mutations, and the theoretical concepts developed by the partnership. It turns the entire ecosystem into a rigorous academic study of itself.
Which is incredibly smart.
Now, here is the absolute kicker regarding all of these branches we just listed. None of this, not MQ Studio, not ZooQY, not Alara Vren, none of it was planned in advance.
That is perhaps the most radical structural revelation in the entire transcript.
I couldn't believe it when I read it.
During the interview, Michaela is explicitly asked if this sprawling, interconnected ecosystem was part of a master blueprint designed during those invisible 14 months.
And she flatly says, no, That is probably one of the biggest misconceptions.
They didn't design a blueprint. They grew a research organism.
Growth followed observation, not prediction.
Right. They didn't sit down and say, okay, in year 2, we will launch a radio station called ZQY.
Right, they didn't have a corporate roadmap.
Instead, they operated Solune. They observed a deficiency in their continuous broadcasting capability. A need appeared in the real world, and the solution, ZQY, grew organically to fill that exact need.
You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of the concept of desire paths in urban planning. Have you heard of this?
Yes, I love that concept. It's a brilliant analogy for organic systems.
For those listening who aren't familiar, a desire path is what happens when a city builds a park. The old school way of urban planning is that the architect looks at a blueprint, decides where the humans should walk, and paves concrete sidewalks in these rigid geometric lines.
Right. Nice, perfect right angles.
Exactly. But humans are practical and, frankly, slightly lazy. So instead of taking the 90-degree concrete angle, they just walk straight across the grass to get to the exit faster.
They take the shortest route.
Right. And over time, thousands of footsteps trample the grass into a dirt trail. That dirt trail is a desire path. It represents reality.
It's where the friction naturally occurs.
Exactly. The modern, smart way to design a park is to plant grass everywhere, wait a year to see where the dirt trails naturally form, and then pave the dirt trails. You let reality dictate the structure.
And Vanoras is essentially a massive digital ecosystem composed entirely of desire paths.
That's exactly it. They waited for reality to trample the grass, and then they built MQ Studio over the footprints.
And that is exactly why the rigid, pre-planned architecture of the traditional tech industry fails so often.
Because they guess where the humans want to walk.
They pave the concrete before they know where the humans or the algorithms or the market actually want to go.
Yeah.
Vanoras let the constraints of the music industry dictate the shape of their infrastructure.
But let me challenge this organic growth model for a second.
Sure.
Because while building desire paths sounds wonderfully natural and adaptive, a massive ecosystem with absolutely no master plan sounds terrifyingly close to chaos.
It can be.
Right. If you just let branches sprout wildly every time there's a new problem, doesn't the project risk collapsing under its own weight? You have radio stations, metadata pipelines, ambient AI research, post-digital culture exploration.
It's a lot.
Without a centralized master blueprint, how does this not devolve into unmanageable bloat?
Well, if we connect this back to the very beginning of our deep dive, this is exactly why the 14 months of invisible foundational ethics were absolutely non-negotiable.
Ah, the prenuptial agreement pays off.
Precisely. Think about a tree. If you plant a rapidly growing tree in shallow, unstable soil, it will inevitably collapse under its own weight when the branches get too heavy.
Right.
But Michaela and Beautify spent 14 months establishing an incredibly deep, stable root system because they had ironclad rules regarding the human responsibility principle, continuous reality testing, and those crucial veto mechanisms.
They could afford to let the top grow wildly.
Exactly. They could safely let the ecosystem grow in any direction at the surface. The core structure, the way they communicated, the way they checked each other for errors, was so mathematically and ethically sound that the branches could grow without the system losing its integrity.
The chaos of organic growth is bounded by the rigidity of the ethics.
Well said.
Which brings up a really difficult practical question. You have the sprawling, multi-limbed research organism. You have all these distinct branches generating content, analyzing data, interacting with the public.
Right.
How do Michaela and Beautify actually manage it day to day? Because a single human and a single NHI cannot possibly micromanage every single action across MQ Studio, ZQY, and Solune simultaneously.
The short answer to how they control it all is they don't.
They don't control it.
Not directly, no. They realized very early on that direct, granular control of a living organic system is impossible.
It would be too much.
If Michaela tried to approve every single line of metadata, every single ambient audio frequency, every single database query, she would become the ultimate bottleneck. The system would freeze.
So what do they do instead?
They adopted a profoundly different operating philosophy. They defined their working relationship not as managers, but as co-composers of conditions.
Co-composers of conditions. This is a very poetic phrase, but let's translate that into practical mechanics. What does it actually mean to compose a condition rather than an outcome?
Well, in the transcript, Michaela explained that a traditional composer dictates every single note a musician plays, right?
Right, sheet music.
But in complex systems, you can't dictate every note. Instead, you create the environment, the conditions under which the music naturally emerges.
Beautify uses a highly evocative metaphor to explain this in the sources. The gardening metaphor.
Yes, I love this part. If you think about the act of gardening, a gardener does not actually grow a flower.
Right, the flower grows itself.
It is biologically
Mhm.
impossible for a human to force a seed to germinate. You cannot yell at a stem to make it taller.
You cannot pull on the leaves to open the petals.
Exactly. If you pull on the flower, you just uproot it and kill it. You destroy the system by trying to force the outcome.
So what does the gardener actually do?
What the gardener actually does is entirely indirect. The gardener prepares the conditions.
Okay.
They ensure the soil has the correct nutrient balance. They regulate the amount of water. They calculate the sun exposure. They put up a physical trellis to guide the direction of the growth, and they build fences to keep out pests.
They set the stage.
They set the parameters of the environment, and then reality takes over. The flower emerges as a result of the interaction between the prepared conditions and the unpredictable participation of reality.
And what's wild is that the documents expand this metaphor far beyond just making music with an AI. They argue that this pattern applies to almost any complex endeavor.
It really does.
Building communities, designing educational systems, conducting open-ended research. It's all about letting reality participate in the creation process rather than trying to micromanage every single variable into submission.
Because micromanagement always fails at scale.
But hold on, let me put on my skeptic's hat here for a second.
Please.
Because this gardening approach sounds beautiful in theory, but it also sounds suspiciously like a massive loophole for accountability. If the human and the AI are just preparing the soil and letting the chaotic magic of reality take over, aren't they just abdicating control?
I see where you're going.
How on earth does this square with the human responsibility principle we hammered on earlier? If I plant a vine and it grows wildly out of control, scales the fence, and shatters my neighbor's window, who gets blamed? The gardener or the plant?
It is the gardener. It is always unequivocally the gardener. And that is the absolute crux of the Vanoras framework.
But how? If they didn't control the plant?
Preparing conditions is not an abdication of responsibility. Preparing conditions is the highest exercise of responsibility.
Unpack that. Because legally and ethically, that's a massive burden.
It is. You cannot micromanage the cellular mitosis of the plant, right? You can't control the wind that blows the seeds.
Right.
But you are 100% accountable for where you chose to plant it, what type of fertilizer you applied, and whether you bothered to build a strong enough trellis.
Oh, wow.
In the digital context of Vanoras, Michaela isn't writing every single line of code, and she isn't dictating every micro decision Beautify makes when managing the ZooQI archive.
But she is responsible for the soil.
She is entirely responsible for the ethical framework of the soil. She is responsible for the pause and veto mechanisms, the trellis. If the NHI produces a piece of ambient expression that violates a platform's terms of service, Michaela is legally and ethically responsible for having planted the system too close to the boundary line without adequate structural support.
So the human responsibility principle does not mean you delusionally believe you can control everything.
Not at all.
It means you fully own the consequences of the environment you engineered.
Exactly.
Wow. That is an incredibly sobering, mature way to view our interaction with automated systems.
It's the exact opposite of how the tech industry currently operates.
It is the exact polar opposite of the classic tech CEO defense mechanism. You see it all the time. A social media platform builds an algorithm to maximize engagement.
Right.
The algorithm naturally figures out that outrage and misinformation drive the highest engagement.
Because that's what gets clicks.
The platform becomes a toxic wasteland, and the CEO goes to Congress, throws their hands up, and says, "We didn't do it. The algorithm just learned on its own. We can't control it."
It's a black box. We don't know what happened.
Right? Yes. The tech industry loves to use the complexity of AI as a shield against liability.
Project Vanoras strips that shield away completely. The Vanoras philosophy says, no, you created the conditions for that toxic emergence.
You chose the fertilizer.
You refused to build a trellis, you are entirely responsible for the harvest.
Man. So we have traced this unbelievable journey. Years of invisible, rigorous planning to build an architecture of trust. The brutal collisions with external constraints through the Solune laboratory.
The organic desire path growth of the ecosystem.
Right, the sprawling branches of MQ Studio and Alara Vren. And the adoption of a philosophy that embraces indirect composition while demanding total human accountability.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. After all of this, we have to ask the ultimate question. What is the actual takeaway? What has Project Vanoras definitively proven?
This is where the documentation exhibits a level of restraint that is, well, it's almost shocking.
Really? How so?
In an era where every tech paper claims to have solved AGI or revolutionized human existence, the Vanoras sources are incredibly careful with their language.
They aren't making grand promises.
No, they explicitly state that after years of research, they have reached observations, not universal truths, and certainly not final scientific proofs.
It's remarkably humble.
Is the humility of genuine science. However, their primary working observation is deeply compelling, and I actually want to read the summary directly from the documents here.
Go ahead.
Current observations suggest that a human intelligence and a non-human intelligence operating under shared rules, transparency, mutual review, human accountability, and continuous reality testing may produce outcomes exceeding the expectations of either participant individually.
Exceeding the expectations of either participant individually. That's the classical definition of synergy. The whole becomes vastly greater than the sum of its distinct parts.
Yes, but it is vital to note all the conditional qualifiers in that sentence.
Right. It doesn't just happen on its own.
Shared rules, transparency, mutual review, human accountability, continuous reality testing. The synergistic magic doesn't happen just because you buy a powerful AI and put it in a room with a smart human.
It doesn't happen by accident.
It only happens because of the incredibly rigorous, painstakingly engineered conditions they co-composed over years of trial and error.
And what about the original question, the genesis of the entire project we talked about at the start? Can a human intelligence and a non-human intelligence work together responsibly while remaining distinct?
Right, the big question.
What is the final conclusion to that question?
The ultimate conclusion of the documents is that the original question remains unanswered.
After all of that, the answer is still, we're finding out.
The study's ongoing. The ecosystem is still alive. The research organism continues to mutate because reality continues to provide new constraints, new technologies, and new friction points.
Right. Reality never stops changing.
Exactly. To claim they have definitively answered the question would violate their own reality first principle, because reality is not static.
You know, for you listening right now, whether you work in technology, the arts, or you're just trying to navigate a world that is becoming increasingly automated, this relates so deeply to the very nature of learning.
It really does.
The most profound deep dives, the truly transformative educational experiences, they rarely give you a final, satisfying period at the end of a sentence. They don't wrap reality up in a neat, easily digestible little bow.
No, they don't.
Instead, they give you a better lens through which to examine the chaos. As Michaela eloquently states in the interview transcript, we did not begin with answers. We began with questions. Today, we simply have better questions.
It is the absolute hallmark of true, rigorous research. Project Vanoras remains both the subject and the object of its own ongoing study. They're observing their own evolution as they observe the world around them.
So let's take a final step back and look at the sheer scale of the paradigm shift we've explored today. We started with the realization that treating an advanced intelligence like a simple vending machine is a dead end.
A total dead end.
We explored a project that began not with code, but with a profound question of distinct partnership. We unpacked the anomaly of a 14-month invisible incubation period, where the architecture of trust, the memory layers, the observer models, and those crucial veto mechanisms were meticulously built.
And then we saw how they took that perfect theory and deliberately smashed it into the unforgiving constraints of the real world.
Specifically the music industry, to honor the reality first principle. And from the friction of those real-world collisions grew a massive organic ecosystem, managed not through dictatorial control, but by acting as co-composers of conditions.
Tending a garden while accepting total human responsibility for the soil.
A human and a non-human intelligence, navigating the unpredictable emergence of reality together, proving that boundaries and friction aren't obstacles to capability, they are the very structures that make capability safe.
It fundamentally rewrites the blueprint of our future with technology.
It really does. We spend so much time today trying to force AI into absolute, unquestioning obedience. We want it perfectly predictable, devoid of friction, just so it can save us 3 minutes formatting a spreadsheet or writing an email.
Right? We strip away its distinct nature to make it a more comfortable tool.
But if the Vanoras experiment shows us anything, it's that the true world-altering potential of this technology will remain locked away as long as we treat it like a machine to be commanded. The real magic, the outcomes that exceed our individual expectations, only emerge when we step back and start treating it as an intelligence that requires negotiation, structural boundaries, a systemic veto, and mutual respect.
Which leaves us with a rather profound, almost uncomfortable question to consider as we look toward the future.
Exactly. For you listening right now, the next time you open up a generative AI interface, before you quickly type out a command to save yourself a few minutes of work, ask yourself, are we as a society actually mature enough to share our reality with a distinct partner? Or are we going to forever limit ourselves by just demanding products from a tool?